We shall begin. The adequate notice of this regular meeting as required by the Open Public Meetings Act was provided by the posting, mailing, delivery, and filing of this notice on January 9th, 2023. This notice was on that date posted on the bulletin board in the township office, sent to the Courier News and Tap into Warren, and filed with the township clerk of the Township of Warren, all in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act. Please join me in rising for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Of a roll call.
I will call the roll. Mr. Desai. Mrs. Fightbaum.
Here.
Ms. Keller.
Here.
Mr. Otto.
Here.
Mr. Tor.
Here.
Mr. Valentino. Mr. Weinstein.
Here.
Mrs. Zahn.
Here.
Mr. Brzee.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Resolved that the Board of Education approves the public and private session minutes of the September 18, 2023 board meeting. Second.
I will call the roll. Mrs. Fightbaum.
Yes.
Ms. Keller.
Yes.
Mr. Otto.
Yes.
Mr. Tor.
Yes.
Mr. Valentino. Oh, excuse me, he's not here. Mr. Weinstein.
Yes.
Mrs. Zahn.
Yes.
Mr. Brzee.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Correspondence and information. I will turn it over to Dr. Mingle.
Thank you, Mr. Brzee. I reported 4 emails to the board for correspondence. For HIB investigations, there was 1 investigation at the middle school that was not found to be an incident of HIB. And for the suspension report, there were 4 in-school suspensions at Warren Middle School.
Thank you, Dr. Mingle. Well, welcome everyone. For those in the room, first of all, I wanted to thank the students and the art department at the Warren Middle School for the, what I can only describe as amazing display of artwork that's on display in the library here. If you have a chance, I would encourage you to look around. I've recognized a few familiar names myself. And these are pretty talented artists that we have. So hopefully you are as impressed as I was. Regarding the agenda, item B9, I wanted to thank the Warren Township Youth Services Commission for their generous donation. Items C1 and C2 are traditional welcome to our new staff members, full-time and substitutes. We hope they are as excited to be with us as we are to have them. Item C6, I wanted to draw the attention to, we have 2 staff members, Ms. Harris, Ms. Russo, each with at least 25 years of experience. Fairly impressive. We wish them both the best in their retirement, and we thank them for their strong dedication to the students of Warren Township. Also regarding this evening's agenda, we have adjusted it slightly to move the new business towards the front of the agenda, which will be next. And given that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Zahn.
Thank you, Mr. Brzee. On October 11th, 2023, I attended a panel discussion sponsored by the Jewish Federation of West Central New Jersey and hosted by Temple Shalom in Bridgewater, entitled Community Call to Action, a panel discussion about handling the rise of anti-Semitism in our schools. This panel discussion had been planned for quite some time, and I registered many weeks ago, well in advance of the horrific terroristic attacks that took place 9 days ago in Israel. Present in the audience were the Somerset County officials and municipal leaders from Bridgewater, as well as the superintendent and school board members of the Bridgewater-Raritan School District, and board members and educators from other districts, and many parents. Also present were law enforcement members of the local police and the sheriff's office. The discussion was located in a spacious sanctuary of the temple, and the space was nearly full. Before commencing with the panel discussion, the executive director of the Jewish Federation of West Central New Jersey spoke to the fact that this panel discussion was taking place only a few days after the events of October 7th. She acknowledged the feelings of many in the room that coming together in support and solidarity was a strong urge in the face of the terrorist attacks of Hamas mere days before. She reminded the audience of the other local gatherings that were planned for the coming days and encouraged attendance. However, this panel discussion had been long planned and would remain focused on the topic of the rise of anti-Semitism in our schools, and she requested that audience questions remain on that topic. I share this with you because I know well the pain, the fear, the grief, and the resolve being experienced by beloved members of my own family and by many dear friends and neighbors. It was felt that night as well. But this was not addressed by the panel, and my report out this evening stays focused on the topic of that evening. The panel consisted of representatives from the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, the United States Attorney's Office, the New Jersey Attorney General's Office, and Rabbi Dan Selsberg of Temple Shalom. The moderator started the conversation by asking the question, what are we seeing locally? All of the panel participants agreed that through the end of 2022, incidents of anti-Semitism are at an all-time high. The ADL tracks reported incidents of anti-Semitism as well as conducting independent research regarding attitudes and opinions of Americans towards Jews. Data collected by the ADL shows an overall increase of anti-Semitic incidents by more than 30% in 2022 from the previous year. New Jersey had the third highest increase across the country, and 2022 saw a 46% increase in school and at school adjacent settings. This was consistent across all school districts and increasingly appeared at younger and younger ages. ADL research also disclosed that 85% of Americans surveyed believe at least one of the familiar anti-Semitic tropes, and 20% of Americans surveyed believed 6 of these tropes. This data was similar to data collected by the New Jersey State Attorney General's Office, which showed that 2022 saw a more than 30% increase in all bias incidents over the previous year, setting a new record. The New Jersey AG's data showed a quadrupling of bias incidents from 2018 through 2023. Additionally, for the first time ever, 2022 data shows that schools are the most likely site of bias incidents. The U.S. Attorney's Office shared that reports and prosecutions of bias crimes are also up. The moderator followed with the question, why are these numbers up? One of the ADL presenters pointed to increased polarization and the normalizing of extremism as a key contributing factor to the increase in anti-Semitic acts. In particular, it was stated that there needs to be a greater focus on understanding meme culture. I admit, although risks of internet usage was a familiar concern to me, I had never given thought specifically to meme culture. Memes on their face can appear funny and popular. Repeating the memes, participating in their dissemination can build a sense of community, which all humans seek and which is particularly appealing to young people. Many memes found on popular social media sites contain dog whistle-like content that is anti-Semitic, racist, or perpetuate other forms of bias. Many young people may be unaware of the meaning, stereotypes, and tropes behind the memes that they share. Rabbi Selsberg shared his experience working with young people and the attraction of appearing cool, and how that can result in a low report rate of anti-Semitic incidents by children. The next question of what does government do about anti-Semitism in schools was answered by the U.S. Attorney's Office, which described the enforcement of federal laws relating to hate crimes, as well as civil enforcement of Title IV and VI. The New Jersey Attorney General's Office also mentioned the enforcement of state laws against discrimination, and both of these offices described instances in which they work together in the investigation and prosecution of crimes. The The New Jersey AG's office also mentioned outreach efforts such as a recently released guidance to schools regarding response to bias incidents. The New Jersey AG's representative stressed the importance of schools responding to a bias incident by, quote, coming out and taking a clear stand against bias. The New Jersey AG's office also stated that they conduct various trainings across the state with more than 200 such trainings so far this year. The last question for the moderator was, what should parents and schools do after an incident? The ADL offered the following acronym: DEAR, D for define, E, educate, A, act, R, report. Define calls upon schools to have policies in place that define anti-Semitism in a clear way so that acts are identified. Educate calls upon schools to have adequate training so that all stakeholders understand the definition of anti-Semitism, students, staff, administrators, etc. ACT calls upon all stakeholders to call out hate and anti-Semitism. The representative recommended that an action plan be in place for responding to bias incidents. Finally, report calls on parties to report bias and anti-Semitic acts when observed and to take seriously all such reports. She stressed the importance of publicly labeling anti-Semitic behavior when it happens, and that schools should provide clear information on how to report such incidents. Rabbi Selsberg again offered his perspectives on working with young people and the challenges of getting kids to report biased behavior. The New Jersey Attorney General's office shared that any reports of bias incidents that are made to local authorities get reported to the AG's office and are captured in their data. Similarly, the ADL representative stated that reports to them are also reported to the AG's office. The AG's office appears to capture reported data well, but of course the gap is whether bias incidents are reported in the first place. At that time, there was an opportunity for public Q&A. The first question of which was, what recommendation does the panel have for staff training? The ADL referred the audience to its website where it has support and training opportunities available. The goal is zero indifference among students and teachers and a climate of upstanders. The training seeks to empower students to support their peers. She stated that anti-bias training in school-age children must go, quote, beyond the minimum. Another audience question was, how do we prevent radicalization online? And the ADL representative stressed the importance of awareness and media literacy. It is important to teach young people to detect false and misleading information, as well as tropes and biased language. One common source of online harassment and exposure to biased language and memes is in multiplayer games. According to the ADL representative, 70% of teens and preteens have been harassed in online gaming communities. Many of these young people have been exposed to white supremacist and radical extremist ideas in these gaming and online spaces. The closing thoughts from the panel, I will share a few of those. It is important to work with families who may downplay the seriousness of biased behavior. Responses such as, they are just kids, the cool kids are doing it, etc., must be addressed. It is important that everyone knows there are some things we don't joke about. It is important to report bias incidents. The ADL has a reporting feature that can be used in cases of anti-Semitism. Also, biased incidents should be reported to the school and under certain circumstances to the local police. Schools should make the reporting process transparent and easy. Education regarding anti-Semitism needs to start with young children. Schools should find the right programs to address this need. Bias incidents easily spill over from schools into local communities. It is critical that towns have a close relationship with local houses of worship. All should collaborate and be united against hate. And finally, the comment that we should seek to make bigotry uncool. My final thoughts. On this board, we have noticed and responded to an increase of bias incidents and anti-Semitism in our schools, most particularly our middle school. Attending panel discussions such as this one is just a part of an overall response by the district to address and reduce these incidents. I know that every member of this board takes anti-Semitism very seriously. Anti-Semitism, indeed, bias of any kind, receives an immediate response. It is our goal that every student feels physically, emotionally, and socially safe in our schools, and that every family feels supported. Additionally, as the board's liaison to the Township Committee, I can say that we do work together to address anti-Semitism and bias in our communities. And with that, I'll open it to my fellow board members if they have any questions about the panel discussion.
Seeing none. Mrs. Zahn, thank you very much for attending and also sharing back the notes from the meeting with not just the board, but with the public as well. So very much appreciate that. Moving on the agenda to superintendent's remarks, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mingle.
Thank you, Mr. Brzee, and thank you, Mrs. Zahn, for your report out. I did want to highlight things that are in place for some of the recommendations that were made there. So on the school district website, warrentbue.org, there's a section called anti-bullying information, but that includes links to the policies that are referred to by those committees around bias and intimidation, harassment, bullying, what the policies are, what the processes are for how the school district handles a complaint that comes to it, guidance for parents on what the New Jersey state law says versus what people might think of in the regular nomenclature about bullying. It has contact information for district anti-bullying coordinator, Title IX, and affirmative action officer. And most importantly, related to the presentation, there's a section for filing a complaint that goes directly to the school district. And once that, and it can be anonymous. So that's important for people to be aware of. So there's no reason not to report something that is a concern out of fear of retaliation or retribution or something like that. That process triggers a legally mandated timeline of how it gets processed, reported to the Board of Education, reported to the state of New Jersey. And as the panel that Mrs. Zahn was referring to talked about, under certain circumstances, that happens in coordination with the Warren Police Department. And if there's the possibility of a bias incident or a bias crime, the Somerset County Prosecutor's Office. So that's all available in a block of text on the district website to make it very easily accessible for everyone. On a switching gears, I am filling in for Mr. Kimmick on a student achievement report, and I just want to share with the board. I think the board is aware, but for the public, this is a state mandated report and format of that report. So if we could bring that up onto the so that people on Zoom can see that. There's a lot of text on these slides, or a lot of numbers, I should say, because of the state mandated template. It will be available on the website, so people can go back and look at it in more detail. And I'll highlight the topics as we scroll through here. So this is based on last spring's New Jersey state assessment results for the district in a couple of different areas. So that includes the NJSLA, which is the state assessment in English, language arts, and mathematics. And then there are a couple of other kinds of assessments that are used for specialized populations, which I'll talk about when we get to them, the DLM and the New Jersey Access for ELS. And we'll also highlight science, which was new this year, and some other information about upcoming assessments in the 2023-24 school year. Okay, so students in grades 3 through 8 take the NJSLA ELA, which is English language arts and literacy assessments. And in 3 through 8, the mathematics assessments. In the middle school, some students take Algebra 1 or geometry while they're at the middle school. Those are actually high school assessments. If they're taking those courses while they're with us, they have to take the high school assessment. And then this past year, there was the first year of a new science assessment, which is only given to students in grades 5 and 8. There is a small cohort of students, very small, that takes something called the dynamic learning map. This is for students who receive certain special education services. We're not allowed to report out results for cohorts that are below 20 students, so there are no results in this presentation, but I wanted you to be aware that that exists. And then students who receive services as English language learners take something called the Access for ELS assessment, which I'll go into the results in a little bit more detail. Just a couple of highlights. The ELA assessment looks at both reading and writing and focuses on skills of close reading, synthesizing ideas within and across texts, determining the meaning of words and phrases in context, and writing effectively when using and or analyzing sources. These are much more robust exams than the kinds that most people might remember from their own days taking standardized assessments in schools, and they've been in place now for several years. Math emphasizes the importance of grade or course level skills, depending on whether they're in a high school course or a grade level course, as well as the knowledge, practices, and concepts that it takes to be a mathematician or a math practitioner. The test from the state looks at certain major content for each grade level and then additional supporting content that may actually carry over from one year to a different, as well as reasoning and modeling. In both cases, it's important to note that the tests are variable and that different students have different assessments. So there's no way for us to directly compare, even though we're giving summary information today, because students are not assessed on every grade level standard necessarily, and different students in the classroom might have had a different testing experience. For ELA and math, there are 5 levels, level 1 being the lowest, not yet meeting grade level, and level 5 being exceeding. Typically, we look at levels 4 and 5 as quote unquote passing. There is no such thing as passing by the state's definition, but that is kind of what we look at as the way we define it. A couple of other general notes before I get into the scores. The administration of state tests are unlike anything else that happens in a classroom. We remember, I'm sure people can remember SATs or other kinds of standardized tests where there are very high security measures. Students are not allowed to ask teachers for help. In some cases, students do not get the same supports that they have during the day-to-day experience. In other cases, they do. It just depends on the nature of the test and what's allowed. As we typically see, Warren students perform higher across all grade levels in all areas in the state data. And for those that have not seen this presentation before, every year we point out that we don't get comparable school data at the same time that we have to make this presentation. And we always follow up with the curriculum committee about, okay, but how did our students compare against comparable schools? We have a list of schools that the board approved several years ago. Today, we only have the state average data, not necessarily comparable school data. And one of the things that you'll hear me talk more about is the importance of supporting growth across the school year. So we do that through internal assessments. This is a summative assessment that takes place at the end of the school year, but we have lots of internal metrics along the way so that we know how students are progressing throughout the year. I'm sorry, I was speaking to a slide that wasn't in front of you. Okay, so moving on to the actual results in math. As I said, these slides will be available on the district website and the presentation, so you can go back and look at the numbers in more detail. I'm just going to focus on the column that says level 4 state and level 4 and above district. This is the quote unquote passing rate. You'll see that there's a range of scores there from about 59% in grade 8 math. I'll come back to that in a second, to 100% in the high school math classes that students at the middle school take, but in the grade levels, generally speaking, in the 60% ranges. In 8th grade, the students who take algebra or geometry are excluded from grade 8 math scores. So that's only students who are not taking the high school level math classes are the ones reported there in grade 8. You can see that a range of the delta between the state and the district, 20 plus in most places, 30 plus in a couple of places, grade 8 math, much different, as you can tell. This slide shows 2022 compared to 2023. So the rightmost column are the 2022 results for that grade level. And the column next to that, this past year. So in grade 3, 68% in both years. In grade 4, 68 up to 69, 63 to 62 in grade 5, 56 to 64 in grade 6, 63 to 65 in grade 7. The only really large change in math was in grade 8. Which went from 26 to 59%. The board and members who have been involved in the discussion about grade 8 math over the years know that we've made a lot of changes to how grade 8 math operates, which is one of the reasons that we think we're seeing those improvements there. Again, grade 8, excluding students taking the advanced math classes. And then this slide is just showing the difference between the district performance and the state performance. It ranges by grade and year, but generally speaking, about 20 to 25 or so points in the earlier grades. And then at the middle school, a greater difference between our students' performance and that of the state averages. Okay, the same thing for ELA. It's a little bit more straightforward because there's not that idiosyncrasy of high school classes. In ELA, there's a little bit more of a range from grade to grade than there was in math. The raw performance is higher overall than in math. However, the gap between our students and the state averages is smaller. So there's different takeaways from that data, but here you can see the lowest grade being at 60% in 8th grade, the highest being at 72% or so in 4th and 5th grade. Year over year, 2022 on the left versus 2023 on the right, the gap between our performance in Warren and the state, fairly consistent from year to year in most places. The one that jumps out at us is 8th grade there in 2023, only a 5-point difference between the state average and the district average, which is a lot smaller than we're used to seeing. That'll be something that we follow up on. Science. I mentioned that science, this is the first year of a brand new science test. Science looks, it's a totally different format and style and scoring system than ELA and math. Students only take it in 5th grade and 8th grade, so they do not have year over year practice of what this exam looks like. It looks at 3 big areas: scientific and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas. That's what's in the standards. And it's only a 4-point scale instead of a 5-point scale, with 3 and 4 being quote unquote passing, and then a near and a below proficiency. You'll see much lower percentages here compared to ELA and math at both the district and state level. Again, this was year 1 of the assessment. And we do not know yet if they will change the cut scores or where that came from. Prior to COVID, the last time there was a state science assessment, the state averages were in the 70+% range, and in Warren even higher. It's not reasonable that there's been a change of actual performance that matches the state system, but it's again a brand new test in the first year. So we'll see how that plays out as they make adjustments for year 2. Access for English language learners is an assessment system that's tied to staffing. So we are required to point out our multilingual enrollment and staffing. So there's a shift in the nomenclature that the state of New Jersey is using from English language learners, or ELLs, to multilingual enrollment. So you'll see that used interchangeably. Again, this is a template from the state that we have to fill in the numbers for. So in the most current school year, this school year that we're in right now, there are currently 54 students in our English language learner program or multilingual enrollment. That tends to go up over the course of the year as students who are new to the district or in kindergarten become identified as they get into the school year. And you'll see over the past few years, we've grown a bit and then been pretty stable in the low 60s. So we expect that the number will get there as students are identified for the program. And on the bottom of the slide, I thought it might be helpful to point out the difference by school, because there are students who are multilingual learners in all of our schools. It's not just a elementary school thing or a middle school thing. There are students receiving services in every school, and it's very intensive until students get to a certain level on this assessment. So all school districts in New Jersey must administer the access for ELLs to students who are receiving services and students who qualify for services, even if their parents refuse them. This is really important. So there are students reported in our data who do not actually get services from us because parents are allowed to refuse English language learning or multilingual services, but we are still required to test them and report on their progress in learning English. This is also used as one of the school accountability measures for federal grants and in the state system as well. There are 6 levels here. This is not seen as like a passing or not passing. This is just a scale of readiness for students, from entering, where a student knows and uses very minimal social language and minimal academic language, to reaching, which is where they're nearing that point of exiting the program, where they know and use social and academic language at the highest level that this test measures. So this is just a report out of total students in each category. You'll see it's in the access program, it's broken down between K2 and 3-8. So you'll see we have students all along the continuum receiving services in the district. These are last spring students who were tested. The other thing about multilingual learners I'll point out is that all students, even if they are in the entering level here, which means that they have very limited English proficiency, are required to take the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment in math every year, which is very heavily based on reading skills. So that is included in the score reports. And even in English language arts, after 1 year, in the United States. So if a student is learning English and not brand new to the country, they are reported in the student assessment results. Okay, a couple takeaways. This year, everybody up here knows that we have explicit district strategic plan goals related to increasing performance. Oops, sorry, thank you. Oh, I apologize. I was changing it on my computer and not up there. So let me leave this on the screen for a second so you can see it. Okay, so the takeaways. We have prioritized ELA and math performance in our strategic plan. It's on the goals that are printed on the agenda as well. And this year that looks like a lot of professional learning for our staff with math consultants that are in our buildings and are giving very specific grade level feedback, staff grade level and team meetings, so that we have consistency across schools, so that we're not only for each teacher, but each administrator who's going into a classroom and supporting teachers in both ELA and math. And as I mentioned earlier, not only do we have the state data, which only comes once a year, but we have our iReady data and other assessments, which we see on a regular basis. We can drill down now into specific standards that students struggle with. So we know we don't need to work on a specific skill in reading, but this other skill, we see a lot of challenges in third grade. Let's say we can focus our professional development and the interventions on that skill. iReady projections for the last 2 years have been very close to the actual performance that students had on the state test. So that was very good news, so that we know that the data we're using on a day-to-day basis is aligned to how students actually perform on the state testing. Every instructional staff member and administrator has goals tied to students' growth in these areas. And we use our own benchmarks internally, depending on the grade level that kids might be in. They might look different, but we have a series of assessments we use internally to measure progress and plan accordingly. We have basic skill support at the middle school that's scheduled with co-teaching, meaning that there's a teacher interventionist in the classroom with students while they're in their grade level math or ELA class, so that they're collaborating and working together that way. We also have used federal monies that were provided through something called Title I or through the American Recovery Act monies that are used for extended day programs that allows us to provide tutoring free of charge to students who qualify for it as well. Last spring, we also did a careful analysis of our master schedules that led us to increasing the amount of time per day in math to 60 daily minutes, making sure that our ELA time is preserved, meaning that students aren't pulled from that for other kinds of services and programs. We have a what I need period in grades 1 through 5, which allows for remediation, but also enrichment, as well as basic skills in both math and ELA, where students who are showing that they need additional supports get that outside of their regular class time. The schedule for these assessments, access takes place in February, March. DLM for the small cohort of students with special education services is in April and May, and then the larger state assessments all take place in May. Okay, I'm gonna pause it there and take questions from the board.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mingle. Any board member have any questions regarding the student achievement report presentation? Seeing none. Thank you again, Dr. Mingle, and certainly thank you for filling in. Moving on to discussion items. If there are any board members that have a discussion item, if we have any, seeing none, we will move on to committee reports. We will start with the Curriculum, Communication and Technology Committee. Mr. Valentino's not here. Is there? We'll push this to the next meeting. Smith's decides not either. Moving to the Finance, Operations and Security Committee, which had a meeting on October 10th. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Zahn.
Thank you, Mr. Brzee. The Finance, Operations and Security Committee met Tuesday, October 10th with all members present. The bulk of our conversation was a continuation of assembling the materials necessary for the full board to have in executive session, continuing discussion on security matters. Also, we did review a capital planning support proposal, which the committee supports moving to the full board for approval, and that appears as item B12 this evening. We will be rescheduling the December meeting, and our next meeting is currently scheduled for Monday, November 3rd.
Thank you, Mrs. Zahn. Personnel negotiations and communication had no meeting. The ad hoc calendar committee is just getting off the ground, so nothing to report there. This will bring us to our first public commentary. Members of the public had the opportunity to provide their feedback and comments to the board on any agenda item for this first. The second public commentary will be for any topic. Participants, please state your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes to provide the board with your comments and feedback, and we look forward to hearing from you. Are there any members of the public? We'll start in the room, and then we'll move to Zoom, and we'll try to manage both if we can. Are there any members of the public in the room that wish to provide comments or feedback to the board? This is on agenda items, so anything that's on the agenda. Anything that's been spoken to already. Any topic? No? Okay. Anyone on Zoom who has any agenda item topics, please use the raise your hand feature and enable your camera if you can. Being none, is there a motion to close the first public commentary?
Motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the first public commentary has concluded. Guess my timing was good. We will now move on to items for board consideration and action. Dr. Mingle, are there any items you wish to provide comments or feedback on? Are there any members of the board who wish to pull a separate item for a separate vote, have a discussion on any item? Being none. Mrs. Zahn.
Motion to approve items for board consideration, section 13, items A 1 and 2, B 1 through 12, C 1 through 15, and D 1.
Second.
Right, I will call the roll. Mrs. Whitebob,
Yes.
Ms. Keller,
Yes.
Mr. Otto,
Yes.
Mr. Tor,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Mrs. Zahn,
Yes.
Mr. Brzee.
Yes.
Motion's passed 7-0.
Thank you, which brings us to unfinished business. We have none on the agenda. I don't believe there is any. Brings us to public commentary. This is our second and final public commentary for this evening. This can be on any topic. Any member of the public wishes to share their feedback and comments on before the board. If participants could kindly state their name and address, you'll have 3 minutes to provide the board any comment. We will start in the room. There is a podium in the back. If you could be so kind to use that, and the board would certainly be welcome to hear your comments. The book. So there was a question regarding, if I get this wrong, please correct me, regarding an email that was emailed to the board asking for that statement to be read. During COVID, there was a process in place for members of the public to be able to do that. Since COVID and since we're out of COVID, that's no longer a practice of the board. So I think that's what you're referring to. If not, please. Yeah. No problem. Anyone in the room have any comments for public commentary?
First, I'd like to thank the board members being active in the community. I know it's a thankless job, so thank you. I'd like to also thank Dr. Mingle for being present, for being a leader of a fantastic school system, and being, I believe, well-intentioned.
Would you just mind stating your name and address? I apologize.
Sure. Michael Feldman, 49 Geiger Lane, Warren, New Jersey, 07059.
Thank you. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, it's intent manner. For the record, I am not here as a Jewish person. I personally do not consider myself a religious person. I'm not a believer. I am here as a human and citizen of Warren, New Jersey, representing my 2 children, as well as dozens of other Jewish children indirectly under your care, many of whom are not comfortable right now. For what's worth, I denounce Islamophobia, the same as anti-Semitism, hold innocent life, all to the same standard. I would probably put some level higher value on younger life, with the simple fact that there's longer lifespan. It's not lost on me that the average age of a person in Gaza is substantially lower than the average person in Israel. All right. Dr. Mingle and esteemed board members. In 1938, there were 9 million Jews in the world. By 1946, there were 3 million. The other 6 million had been murdered, including Jewish women, pregnant women, boys, girls, babies, and elderly among them. Does that sound familiar? I'm not going to break down the math if anyone wants me to, just for time purposes, but the impact of 9/11 in terms of proportional to the population of the United States and the population of dead, 9/11 was 19 times smaller than the impact for the population of Israel versus the number of dead. 19 times. So to put that in perspective, it would be as if 9/11 here was not just in New York and DC, it would be in San Francisco, LA, Denver, Miami, Salt Lake City, Boston, Chicago, St. Louis, Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Newark, Orlando, Jacksonville, Buffalo, Minneapolis, Phoenix, and Philadelphia, and Baltimore. Do you know anyone in these cities? For the few hundred Jewish people here in Warren, all of us have either directly lost a family or friend or know someone who has. It's just second degree. It's no farther. We are not okay. And you made it worse, Dr. Mingle. You made it worse. Why? I understand your position. I do. You're just saying, hey, this is my job is simply to support the students. I don't comment on world events, period. For an educated person, it's a pathetically shocking view of your duties. Pathetic. Your position is not only ignorant and stubborn, but also shows a complete and utter void of basic human compassion. It's cruel. It's cruel. If tomorrow a cartel from Mexico came to San Diego and slaughtered 1,400 people and, took another 120 hostages, doing who knows what to these people, would you condemn it? Not a rhetorical question. I'll cede 1 second of my time for you to say yes or no.
So a couple items. 3 minutes has gone up. I appreciate what you're saying. Also, the public commentary is not necessarily a Q&A session, so it's our opportunity as a board to hear from the public. We certainly appreciate what you're saying. So we would like to hear
Thank
that.
you. Can I be granted 3 more minutes?
If we could move to another person, then we can certainly come back. Is that
Great.
Is that fair?
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And noted on the questions.
Any other members of the public in the room have any comments?
My name is David Goldstein. I'm at 10 Spencer Lane in Warren, New Jersey, 07059. I usually don't get involved in these types of things. I kind of keep to myself, but having 3 kids in the educational system, I'm deeply, deeply upset by what's transpired here, how there has been no condemning of what happened. I have my oldest daughter who suffers from anxiety. And this has deeply affected her. And obviously you can understand from the parent perspective, it's very hard for me. It's hard for me to explain to her what's going on in the world and why this happens. And the mere fact that the leader of our educational system cannot condemn the violence and the terrorism that has taken place is absolutely appalling and disgusting. I've been in this town for 10 years, and something like this makes me think about leaving. I don't understand how this cannot happen, how we cannot say we are not going to accept what has happened as a community. other townships, other educators, other superintendents have released statements saying they have condemned what has happened. Silence is condoning. And I would really like an answer to the question that Michael has asked. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any, yes, please?
And my name is Michael Jurista, 13 Elmwood Drive, Warren, New Jersey. I wasn't planning on coming here today. But frankly, I feel like I have an obligation to. Many people contacted Dr. Mingle specifically, and I took a back seat to that. I spoke to many of my Jewish brothers and sisters and said, you know, give Dr. Mingle a chance, give the board a chance. I'm going to sit back and let them, they're going to come around. They're going to speak up. And while I sat here, sat at my desk all week and listened, this board and specifically Dr. Mingle did nothing. You are, in my opinion, a bunch of cowards, specifically Dr. Mingle. He told people in this town that he is scared of the backlash from speaking out against children and women being beheaded. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. I have no relatives because of the Holocaust. I knew nobody. My grandparents survived it. And if you don't think that can happen again, it can. And it can specifically because of people who are unwilling to speak up against it. To say you're going to take a back seat because you don't want to get involved in world issues. Mr. Feldman said it's pathetic. I would say that is the nicest way to put it. It's disgusting. It's pathetic. I'm embarrassed to be a part of this town and specifically to have Dr. Mingle as my superintendent. It's disgusting. What is so hard about sending out an email to the parents of this town saying we don't condone anti-Semitism, we don't condone harassment, and by the way, you have a legal obligation, I'm a lawyer. Where is it to say that, by the way, if anybody's harassing or bullying anybody because they're Jewish, come directly to the board. Come to me as the superintendent. We won't tolerate that here. By the way, I don't care if you say that on the same side as the Palestinians. I could care less what you say it on. Where are you in speaking up and saying this is unacceptable? The fact that you remain silent is astonishing to me. And I am not the biggest fan, I assure you, of the president currently. But if you watched his press conference the last week, what he said is apropos, which is silence is complicity. And this board is complicit in the violence that has taken part in the Middle East. Legally, you have an obligation to prevent harassment and bullying, and you've done nothing. Nothing. You also have an obligation legally to present education on the Holocaust and genocide to our elementary school students under NJSA 18A35-28. So, in case you're taking notes, don't you think this would be a good opportunity to maybe present that and say, hey, by the way, let's fulfill our obligation to make sure this doesn't happen again? But you didn't. You stayed silent while Summit and Union and Westfield and Watchung and everybody else in the area said something. You said nothing. It's disgusting. It's embarrassing. And let me put this out there, and I want to make myself abundantly clear. While I find this astonishingly terrible, you better make sure that the next time something happens, whether it be race, transgender issues, or anything like that, you stay just as silent because you've established a precedent that is absolutely disgusting, which is we say nothing when the students of this town they're scared, they're nervous. How about the adults pay taxes? I'm astonished by how silent you've been. Now, I don't know if this is a board issue
Excuse
or you
me.
guys,
I'm sorry to interrupt. We've well surpassed the 3 minutes. If you
Yeah,
could-
I
if you
don't
could wrap
care.
up- if
I
you
don't
could-
care.
If you could wrap up.
here's the deal. Here's the deal. If you're not comfortable with doing your job, and that includes Dr. Mingle, maybe we need to get somebody else to take your board seats from you. There's an election coming up in a few weeks. And if I have to run or somebody else has in the next future to remove you people who won't do your jobs, then get out of the way. And I can't stand the fact that Dr. Mingle said he's scared of the backlash from words when there are people hurting by what's going on here. If you're not tough enough for this job, then find somebody else who is.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else in the room who likes to? Yes, please go ahead.
Christian Bellman, 5 Jessica Lane. Mr. Board President, I want to say thank you to your Vice President, Ms. Soon, for the kind words in the beginning. Very thoughtful words. This was the first time I heard that there was definitely something said against what happened days ago in the Middle East. It is just an act of kindness to condemn the violence, to condemn terroristic acts. We don't have to get into politics, who or what. But what is absolutely I cannot understand it, how we cannot say no to violence. Children, absolutely slaughtered. Women, slaughtered. Civilian men, slaughtered, and not by accident. By plan. We are bracing ourselves to have started SEL this year. Now, how are we helping our children overcome some of the fears with current world situations that are happening? We don't have to get into politics, but condemning violence should absolutely be a priority for this district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bellman. We will move to Zoom if there's any members. Yeah, I'm coming back to you. I didn't forget. Yeah, yep. Any members of the public on Zoom who can, who wish to provide public comments, if you could use the raise your hand feature and enable your cameras. If I'm missing anyone, speak up. I don't see any hands raised. Okay, we will go back to in the room. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Michael Feldman again, 49 Geiger Lane, New Jersey. Where was it? Are we not supposed to be teaching our children compassion, care for others in our community? Is this not part of what we are teaching? Maybe your argument is so weak because there is a different, much darker reason you refuse to say the basic words this community is pleading and basically begging you to say. I condemn the terrorist acts of Hamas against the citizens of Israel. We assume the answer is no, but we don't know because you won't say it. I've read many of your corporate Mr. Superintendent by the books responses. I note they are all virtually identical. I have read your stated methodologies to take a few more days, and I quote, to listen to the community and to process. There's nothing to listen to. There's nothing to process. If the 17,000 residents of this town were all pro-terrorism, I would still expect you to call out terrorism. Your game is to listen on both sides and then do what you view to be least controversial. Stop doing what you think you're supposed to do. Stop doing what you view as best for you. I mentioned intent at the beginning of my comments. I do not think you understand the difference. You equalize something that is not equal. Israel's dropping leaflets telling the innocents exactly where and when they will attack. I understand their intent can be argued, but dragging a lifeless, naked woman on the back of a pickup truck with her genitals mutilated while people are spitting at her, there is no confusing that intent. Holding a headless baby up in the sky and celebrating in glee, and posting the video on the parent's social media. There's no questioning that intent, is there? Everyone has the right to protest peacefully, but at many, not all of these protests, people are chanting glory to the martyrs here, all around us. The University of Wisconsin, someone was sitting on Zoom right now. They sang a good Jew is a dead Jew. Hamas's primary stated goal is to kill my wife, my kids, and every Jewish person in this town. Our goal is simply to survive. We desperately want to feel the strength of your supportive words, Mr. Mingle, and your protection. Some career advice that has served me extremely well. Do not do what you think is best for you. Do what you think is best for others. Do what is best for others, Mr. Mingle, and issue a formal, simple, written apology to the community and condemn the terrorist attacks by Hamas against Israeli citizens and set the proper example to our students and community that we protect one another and care for one another. Will you do that?
Thank you for your comments. Yes, please go ahead.
I just
So
want to make,
we-
hi, Michael Jurista, 13 Elmwood Drive, Warren, New Jersey. I want to make sure the record is abundantly clear. It's being recorded? Yes,
It is on Zoom.
is being video recorded or written recorded?
It's audio and video recorded.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear here because this may not come reflective in the future. And I want to make sure everybody is aware of this. Well, I have appreciated every single board member's attention, and I could truly see that you've given us all the attention for some reason, which kind of matches the cowardness that I've seen so far this week. Dr. Mingle has not looked up once at me, Mr. Feldman, Mr. Goldstein, or anybody else who's given a speech here. He's typed on his computer while we are here telling you that we are scared for our lives and for the lives of our children and the harassment and bullying. And while you sit there looking at your screen, I am disgusted by it. The rest of the board members, I thank you for your attention. But it seems like that the person in charge here, the superintendent, does not care what is happening.
So we reached the 15-minute period. Is there any additional public comments that wish to be had? I'm sorry. Okay. Who told you it would be read? I'm sorry, I'm not being argumentative. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Because if I gave you wrong information, I'd want to know. So we, at this point, have reached the 15-minute 15-minute mark for public commentary. Is there any board member wishes to extend public commentary?
I'll extend it. Let them read it.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, public commentary has been extended for 15 minutes. Would you mind going to the podium again, just so it's captured? Thank you.
Michael Feldman, 49 Geiger Lane, but I'm speaking on behalf of David Rosen. I don't know his address offhand. He lives on the west side of town, northwest. That's acceptable. Huh? Oh, it is. Oh, yeah, you're right. He's sharp. 101 Briarwood Drive, Warren, New Jersey. These are the words of David Rosen, who couldn't be here tonight. Dr. Mingle, I join the voices of many citizens of Warren in condemning your partial and incomplete response to the Hamas attacks in Israel. Currently, there are at least 12, 12 confirmed American citizens being held hostage by Hamas. It has been more than a week. We don't know if they're alive, fed, getting water, being tortured, or raped. The schools have been silent on this topic. Neither my 7th grader nor my 4th grader have discussed the current events in school. There have been no talk about these Americans. Is this not a cause of national outrage, or does it not really matter because they're Jewish Americans? Are they not American enough to warrant conversation in school or a firm, resolute message home to the families from the school? The school systems have failed. It has failed to make a concrete, absolute statement condemning the action of Hamas terrorists. Was this the case in the 1970s when Iran held Americans hostage? Was this the case in 1994 when the terrorists bombed World Trade Center Building 4? What about the Marine barracks or the attack on the USS Cole? Oh, I just wanted record to note that Dr. Mingle looked up for the first time. Can I note that? Did the schools fail to acknowledge and condemn 9/11 when the towers fell and the Pentagon was attacked? My father was there that day. I was there that day. I watched the second plane hit the tower and I watched the tower fall. I saw that. Did you, Dr. Mengel? I cannot understand why the school system would not issue a statement that simply says, we condemn Hamas, we condemn terrorism, we stand with Israel. Anyone who equivocates or otherwise silently provides tacit or constructive approval on the actions of Hamas by not condemning them, by not absolutely condemning and taking holding of American citizens as hostages, are dangerously close to supporting it. Rest assured that you do not support it. I know you do not. I can believe, Dr. Mingle, that you do. I cannot believe, Dr. Mingle, that you do. I will not believe it. That said, you have simply not said it plainly and simply. I am outraged and dismayed by our school system's limp and cowardly response. Dr. Mingle, do your job. Lead the faculty, students, and residents of Warren during this time of great fear, peril, and sadness. On one of the holiest Jewish year, Israel was brutally and savagely attacked in a calculated, well-planned invasion into a sovereign, free, and democratic nation by a terrorist organization named Hamas. Almost 30 Americans were killed. That's on top of the at least 12 that are still being held hostage and being used as human shields if they are still alive. Isn't America supposed to be the shining city of the hill? Aren't you in the school system part of the bedrock foundation of building the future leaders and participants in the great experiment that is the United States of America? If you've not watched Mayor Adams' speech, you should watch it most forthwith. It is attached for your convenience. You might even consider simply sending the speech out to the township with a simple caption, I am sorry I have thus far missed the mark, but I echo Mayor Adams' sentiments. We stand with Israel, we condemn this and stand against Hamas. I rarely agree with Mayor Adams' politics or policies, but he had the courage to do the right thing. To date, Dr. Mingle, you have not. I unfortunately cannot attend the board meeting tonight. I ask this letter to be read into the record during the time for public comment. Please confirm. Disappointed and angry, David Rosen, Warren, New Jersey.
Thank you for sharing. Are there any additional public commentary for the second public commentary? In the room or on Zoom? Seeing none, is there a motion to close the second public commentary?
Motion.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the second public commentary has concluded for this evening. The next is executive session. Please.
Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-11, permits the Board of Education to meet in closed session to discuss certain matters. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Education adjourns to closed session to discuss protection of public safety and property and/or investigations of possible violations or violations of law. Action will not be taken upon return to public session. The length of the meeting is anticipated to be approximately 60 minutes, and be it further resolved, the minutes of this closed session be made public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention? The board will go into executive session in room 1. I believe is where we'll go. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, the board is back into public session.
And motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the board has been adjourned. Thank you, everyone.